Hi, in scenes like this, where there's quite a lot of lights, it can be quite difficult to set up the lights to make a realistic look. You wind up tweaking the colour, the brightness of the lights, re-rendering and seeing what it looks like. In this video I'm going to show you how to do all of that in post, so we can render out with any old light settings we like, fix them all in post later. Here's an example of the render that we're looking at today, and you can see on the render basically there's no real consideration to light levels at all, and all the lights are just white. So we're going to fix that. We're going to fix that using After Effects later on, but we're going to use a method called state sets to render out each bank of lights individually to enable us to change them in post later on. So state sets are a way of manipulating the scene and storing the changes in settings that you've used. So in this case I'm going to use the light lister to change which lights are on or off, and I'm going to record which lights are on and off as different state sets within this dialog here. Later then I can go on and I can batch render those so that each bank of lights gets rendered out separately. So to work this, first of all you see I've got all the lights switched on, which is fine. What I'm going to do now though is I'm going to set up a state set where only the window light and the sun is on. To do that I click the create state set button here, and that gives me a new state. The state 01 is the current state that I'm in, which is everything as it is in the scene at the moment, and I can just rename that by slow double clicking on the name, and I will call that original. Then on state set 2 I'm going to change the light lister settings to enable me to record a different setup for the scene. State sets have this little recording button here. You press it, and once it's pressed any changes you make in the scene are recorded onto that state set. So I'm going to go into my light lister. I'm going to turn the east wall lights off, both table lamps, the recess lights, the west wall lights and the TV light. So I'm literally just left with, oh, and the hall light there. So I'm literally just left with the window light and the sunlight. Once I've got that set up, I unpress the record button, and now that state is recorded. I'm going to rename that as window light. To change between state sets, you don't select the text, it doesn't matter what you select there, that's independent. You click on the green arrow. So at the moment window light is current. If I click on this one it goes back to the original state set. So go back to window light there. Now to create another state set I could either press the create button here, but I think it's actually quicker to right click and just choose clone. If you use the create button here, a new state will be created which matches original, and then you'd have to go in and press the refresh button on the light lister. So I find it easier just to clone it, so I don't have to do that, and then I can just record a new state on here where I'll turn the sun and the window light off, and I'll turn on the east wall lights there and press record. So now I've recorded the east wall lights, and I'm going to rename them as east lights. I'm going to do the same procedure now for every other bank of lights in the scene. Okay, so now we can see I've got my state sets set up. I've got hall lights here which light the foreground of the image, TV light, west wall lights, the recess lights, the lamps, the east wall lights, the window light, and my original with all the lights switched on. Now we've got all those, in the state menu here you'll see there's an option to render all states. We're going to use that, but before we do, let's just have a look at our render setup. The render setup at the moment is set to save this out as interior downloaded.exr. I'm using EXR files because they're high dynamic range images, and that enables our light editing at the end to be much more flexible. I'll do a separate video on HDRIs and how to use them in post-production, but for now we'll just live with an EXR file. Now the problem is if I go onto Hall Lights state set here and render that one out, it's going to save it as interior downloaded.exr. Then it will batch render TV Light, and it will save it as interior downloaded.exr and save over the top of the previous one. Now I could use the record button here to go in and change the name of the file, but actually there's a little macro down here to do that for you. So what I'm going to do is I'm going to browse for my location where I want them to be stored, which in this case is D state sets tutorial render output. And you'll see there that it's got D state sets tutorial render output slash and then state name.exr, and state name is in curly brackets. That bit will be substituted for each of these names in turn as we go through the render. So in order to make that little macro update here, I click the set path button, and it will flicker a few times, and then we can see that I've got TV Light active at the moment. And it's saving to tvlight.exr. If I go to lamps, it's saving to lamps.exr, and so on. Also, I'm rendering out all my lights separately, and I'm going to use those lights combined together to recreate the original image. So I don't actually need to render that path. So if I turn render off just in there, then it means that when I do render all states, it will render all of these states, and it will save me a bit of time. Now I know what you're thinking. You're thinking that if I've got 7 things that I've rendered out here instead of just one, it's going to take a lot longer to render. Well, it does take a bit longer to render. It doesn't take 7 times longer to render because each scene is simpler, but in this particular example it took nearly twice as long to render out all 7 of those independently as it did to render out the original scene. So it's not disastrous, but I can understand that when you're onto high render times, if you're into several hours per render, that's a significant consideration. So what do we do now? We've got all of these things rendered out. Okay, well this is the clever bit, because now there's a plugin for After Effects which allows 3ds Max to export these directly into After Effects, already preset up as a composition with all the layers and blend modes intact. To make that happen, you actually need to set this up. So what you do is you copy 3 files from your Autodesk install folder here. So program files, Autodesk, 3ds Max, whatever version, external plugins, CS5 Windows. It's got a CS4 and a CS5 folder. And the CS5 one works on CS6, which is what I'm using here. You'll see you've got these 3 files. Now the first 2 files here go into the Adobe After Effects support files folder here. So C, program files, Adobe, After Effects CS6 support files, and you can see there and there are the 2 files that I've copied across previously. The other file goes into the plugins folder, and then you need to create a new folder called AEP and place it in there, and you can see that I've placed that one in there. When you do that, After Effects gets a new item in the file menu which enables you to import the data we're about to create here in Max. So within the state sets window here, what we're going to do is go onto the Compositor menu and choose Compositor View. And this expands up the window a bit and gives you something that looks a bit like the slate. If I zoom in on that, we can see it more clearly. Each of these represents the render coming in from the file, and then it goes through a little bitmap converter and into this compositor output, and this is the thing that's going to be exported out to After Effects. So I'm just going to widen that up a bit so the aspect ratio looks a bit more sensible. So the first state set we created was Hall Lights. That comes in here, and you can see Hall Lights output is on layer 7. And just at the end here I've got a little plus sign. If I expand that up, you can see that I've got different settings here I can use for that particular layer in the composite. So first of all, I've got a choice of the layer on or off, and its mask on and off if it's got alpha. And then, more importantly, I've got the blend mode and the opacity, which will be transferred through into After Effects. Now with this, I'm going to change my blend mode to Addition, and you'll see on the thumbnail it now adds the Hall Lights onto the next layer down, which is TV Light, and you can see the two added together now in this image. Now I'm using the Add Blend mode. Again, it's a thing about being in 32-bit HDRI image formats such as EXR. In an 8-bit format, you probably use a screen blend mode to blend those two together, but because we're talking about true light levels in an HDRI, Add is actually the physically correct choice. So on each of these layers I'm going to change the blend mode to Add, and every time I do, you'll see the next layer below gets added into my thumbnail here. And I keep doing that all the way down. Let's add the recessed lights to the layer below. Add the lamps to the layer below. And add the east lights to the layer below that. Okay. I'm not going to change the bottom one to Addition because that will be on normal and that will block out anything that you have below it in After Effects. But you can see here I've got a fully recreated image of the scene here. So what I need to do now is I need to get that out into After Effects. Now that's over here, that's another macro. So if I come down to here, instead of Render Outputs, I choose the Compositor Link tab. It says Create Link, so I'm going to click that. And I'm going to create a link to my project folder, and I'm just going to put it in there, and I'm going to call it Interior Downloaded. It creates an SOF file, which is just basically an XML file which has all of the data of where the different EXR files are, what the blend modes are, and so on. And the After Effects plugin just reads that and creates the composition for you. So now I've done that, I'm ready to go into After Effects. So let's load up After Effects. Go to File, and then down here we need Open Compositor Link, which is the plugin. And then where it says Create Link, it actually means open, really. So I'm going to go and open that SOF file. And any second now, you'll see now it brings up the EXR files all loaded in, and a composition here, which if I double click on that, I'm going to switch on the modes here so I can see the blend modes. You can see that my layers are already in place with the correct blend modes on. It looks a bit washed out on the screen, and that's because of the way that After Effects defaults to 8-bit. So just need to go to the project settings here, and we need to change it from 8 bits per channel to 32 bits per channel there. We're also going to work in linear workspace, so I'll change it to sRGB here and click linearize working space and OK that, and you'll see now that I get a really good image here reconstructed from the 3ds Max file. That's a start, that's adding everything together to make my image. Now comes the clever bit, because the whole point of doing it this way is that I can now change the lighting without having to re-render. So if I want to make it nighttime, I'll just come down here and I'll turn the window light off. And straight away it's a nighttime scene. Well, let's say we're watching TV in the evening. Maybe I would then turn off the hall lights because they're going to reflect on the screen. My west wall lights and my east wall lights. and I'd probably leave the recess lights on and the table lamps on, and obviously the TV light would have to be on. So you can see I can recreate a completely different scene without having to re-render, which is nice in itself. And in fact, if you planned it, you'd only render out these three, wouldn't you? But you know, that's planning. It's overrated. Next thing, well, let's turn the TV light off, because what I want to do is I want to set up the lighting in the room to make it look comfortable, and we'll deal with the TV again in a minute. So first of all, I'm just going to bring up my recess lights on their own, here in the thing, and on the recess lights I'm going to go to the color correction folder, and I'm going to bring it in an exposure control. Put it straight on there. I can use the exposure control for turning that light up and down. Because I'm in 32-bit mode, this will be a physically correct conversion. And if we view that in the final composition, and then we turn the exposure up and down, you can see that it actually makes the room look realistically like they're being turned up and down, because it is physically correct. So I'm going to turn the exposure down a little bit, because I want those to be little multicolored LED lights which are going to change color. I'm also going to go onto my lamps here and put an exposure on there, and I'm going to turn them down a little bit as well. Not too much, just about 0.7, something like that. Now I want to do some color correction, okay, because I want these table lamps to be a bit warmer feeling, and obviously I want this recess light here to be multicolored. So to do that, I'm going to use the photo filter effect, and instead of warming filter, well, actually warming filter is probably quite good for this, just turn up the density of it a little bit to give it a nice warmer feel there. I'm going to do the same on the recess lights. I'm going to put a photo filter on there, but instead of warming filter, I'm going to choose custom, and then I'm going to turn my density up to 100 and choose a color. Red, I think. And I'm going to turn my exposure down a little bit more, because that's quite intense. So I've now changed the lighting on the lamps here and the lighting on the recess. I'm going to animate that now. So if I expand up the recess layer here, expand up the photo filter, I get to color, and click the little stopwatch on the color, that's going to start laying keyframes down. You see it's laid down a keyframe there on frame 1 where it's going to be red, and then I'm going to move it forward 50 frames for 2 seconds and change the coloring to yellow. And you'll see it's put a keyframe down there as well. Okay, that, and move on another 2 seconds to 100. And change the color to green. Okay, and now if I play that animation through, you'll see that the lighting is animated and changes color accordingly. Now if you were setting that up in a render, you'd have to set that up and animate it, obviously, but what happens then if you change your mind about the timing of it, or you change your mind about the order the colors go in? Well, you'd have to re-render the whole lot. Not so with this method. Right, so everything we've dealt with up to now has just been a still image. What I'm going to do now is I've already got some pre-rendered versions of this animated, which I'm going to import in now. And if I had done that all in the same Max session, I could just update the link and update it again in After Effects and it would come through okay. But actually I rendered them in a different location and they're in a different folder, so the easiest way to get around that is just to come in and we'll do a bit of tidying up here. We get rid of hall lights because we're not using those, and these ones, and then up here we just pick the ones we are using, lamps, and we right click, we go replace footage of file, and we go and replace it with the new rendered EXR sequence. Now move down here until I get to lamps, and you'll see that there's 250 EXR images here, one for each frame, but if I select any one of them, After Effects recognizes it as an EXR sequence, and it will load the whole sequence in. You don't have to select the first one or the last one or anything like that, just any one will do. So replace lamps, I'm going to replace recess and TV light. And those are now replaced, and if I just play this through, you'll see that now that's fully animated. So this is the RAM preview, and it looks posterized because the RAM preview is operated in 8 bits and we're using 32 bits per channel, so it's got a much reduced dynamic range and hence different numbers of available levels of lighting in each channel. But you can see this is fully animated now. And what I like about this technique is that if I look here at the fruit bowl, my recess lights are glowing green, and you can see that they're reflecting green off the fruit bowl. And the reason for that is that when the recess lights were rendered out, every reflection and every bit of GI associated with those lights was also rendered out as well. So I can just animate that colour whenever I like, and the effects of that colour throughout the room will be replicated correctly. Now what I'm going to do is, now we're going to bring the TV light in, and I'm actually going to put a piece of footage onto the TV and use that footage to turn the brightness of the TV light up and down and change the colour so it lights the room in the correct way, as if as if the TV was actually on. Normally you would expect to have to track the TV, so if you were tracking this it would be fairly easy to get it to track up to here, but as soon as the TV goes off the screen it starts to become a lot more difficult to track accurately, and then the TV leaves the screen for a while, and then later on in the animation just comes in at the top here again, and that again would be a real pain to track. So what I'm going to do is I'm actually going to take that object directly out from Max through our compositor link as a 3D object in After Effects. And to do that I need to have an object on the front of the screen in Max, which is just going to be a plane, and I need the camera that I'm viewing it from. And if I export both of those from Max out into After Effects, it will match exactly with the TV that I'm looking at. So let's flick back into Max, let's close down the compositor link and reset link here. And the reason I've reset it is because I've already broken the link anyway by re-importing animated footage over the top. So what I want to do now is I want to create a new link which is just going to have the objects in. So first things first, I'm going to turn off all of these because I don't want to export any more footage, so I'll turn all these to non-render. And then I'm going to create an object on the front of my screen here. So let's just zoom in on this. So I'm just going to create a plane, auto grid it onto the front of the TV, like so. And I'm actually just going to move that forward a little bit, just to make sure that it is not going to be exactly in the same position as the actual TV screen behind it, and I'll call that TV screen. Now to get that TV screen and the camera, which is over here, out into After Effects, all I do is select them both, and then I choose my object state set down here, which is where I can export objects using the same technique, and I just click the record button once and then unclick it again, and those two objects are now recorded in the object state set. And if I expand this up, you can just see now I've got camera 3 and TV screen recorded in there. Switch back to original so we can see it and go back to the camera view, and then I've reset the link already. I'm just going to create a new link. I'm going to call it Interior Downloaded Objects. Save that, and then when I go back to After Effects, I go to my Open Compositor link. I reset the link again because I don't want to try and import the old still footage, and then I create a new link to the objects one that I saved here, and it brings in the extra objects in a little solids folder here. We've got TV screen. It's also brought them into my layer stack here. It's brought these back, which is a bit of a pain, so we'll just get rid of those again, and now we're left with the camera, the TV screen, and the previously rendered footage. And you can see there that the TV screen has been brought in exactly on top of the TV. In fact, let's turn the TV light on now so we can see the room a little bit better. You can see it lines up exactly there, and if I play this through, you can see that it is already tracked. So you can see the TV moves exactly with the image of the TV, and as we come round to the point where it comes back in the top again, there's no tracking issues at all because we haven't had to do any tracking. So what we're going to do now is I'm actually going to bring in some footage to put on the TV, and I'm going to replace that plane with the actual TV footage. I'm also going to use exactly the same footage to drive the brightness and colour of the TV light, so that the whole scene will light up as if it's lit by the TV. So first things first, bring in the TV footage. Now the footage I'm using is just an excerpt from Men in Black 3. I'm using it mainly, apart from the fact it's a cool film, I'm using it mainly because of the big colour changes that you see on the screen. So browns, blues, greens, and I'm hoping that that will light the room up in brown, blue and green as the TV footage plays. I'm not actually going to use this footage directly. First of all, I'm going to pre-comp that, and it'll become obvious why later. So if I just right click on the TV footage before I bring it in, do new comp from selection, I now get a composition called TV footage. That is what I'm going to use to put on the front of my TV. So I select the TV screen object here, and then while I'm holding the Alt key down, I drag the TV footage pre-comp on top of the TV screen that is selected, and that will replace the TV screen with the footage. As I play it through now, you'll see that the animated TV footage follows the TV exactly. So the TV footage here has black lines top and bottom. Okay, so if I go into my pre-comp and have a look at it, you'll see that I've got a PAL D1 sized pre-comp. I'm not going to change that now because that has replaced the plane that I've put in, and if I change that to HD to match the aspect ratio of the TV, it will stretch out beyond the aspect of the TV. But what I am going to do is I'm going to scale it up so it fills the whole frame, and then it'll look stretched in here, but it will unstretch itself in the main composition. So if I unconstrain the proportions, means I can change the height now to get something like that, and when that is now stretched across the screen, it will be back to normal aspect ratio. So if I go back now to my main composition, you can see that it now fills up the whole screen. So within my pre-comp, I've managed to change the settings, which means that I don't have to worry about the actual size and shape of the plane anymore. The pre-comp does all that for me. Now the final thing is to modulate the TV light according to that TV footage. So what I'm going to do is I'm going to bring another copy of that pre-comp in, and I'm going to put it directly above the TV light. This might seem like a slightly odd thing to do, but I'm going to scale this up now to match the whole of the size of the screen. So S for scale, and increase the scale on that so it fills the whole screen. And then on the effect controls for this layer, and this layer only, notice not inside the pre-comp, I'm going to put in a basic blur, a box blur. Doesn't have to be anything fancy because it's only to really blur out the image. So turn on repeat edge pixels, and then I'm going to blur the hell out of this image. So I'm going to take it up to a blur radius of say 400, and what you'll see has happened there is this has now become the average color of the TV picture. And if I go through different points of the animation, you can see that the average color of the TV changes quite dramatically. So now to make that effect the TV light, I'm going to change the blend mode on there from normal to multiply. So I'm multiplying that color by the TV light, but at the moment it is also multiplying it by everything beneath. So the lamps here have changed color, and although it's not quite as obvious, the recess light here has changed color. So the final stage is just to take these two layers together and to right click and choose pre-compose, and that will make a little pre-composition of this TV light with the color change, and then that means that the multiply is literally only affecting the light because they're both bundled up inside this pre-comp. So I now just have to change that blend mode back to add to make the whole room work. And if I play this through now, you will see that the TV light actually affects the colour of the room. Now, the whole image at the moment, the TV light itself is very bright and the TV is very bright. So what I'm going to do is I'm just going to go into my TV footage pre-comp, and I'm going to put an exposure control so I can turn the brightness of the TV down. Turn the exposure of the TV down. Go back to my main composition, and the entire scene has changed accordingly. In fact, I'm also going to turn those lamps down. I had an exposure on those already. And I might turn the TV up a little bit actually. So I can adjust the brightness levels of the TV. And more to the point as well, if I go into the TV footage and I decide that I don't actually like the part of the sequence that's playing at any one moment, I can actually just drag the footage within that pre-comp to make it start and finish at a different time. So if I wanted it to start with this kind of brown light, going to blue, going to green in the room, I could do that. And when I go back to my main composition, you see the TV has gone to that bit of footage, the room is lit up brown. And as I go through next stage, it's blue, and next stage you can see the green lights come in and it lights up the thing there. So by pre-comping the TV footage in its own little envelope, it means I've got full control over what the TV does, and I don't need to do any more tweaking to my main render. So let's just put that back, because the final thing to do now is to actually render that out as an AVI so we can watch it properly. I'm going to turn those lamps down a bit more, these pesky lamps. And I shall render that one out. So open up my render queue, go to my project and drop Autodesk link on. Output module, I'm going to change to Xvid, and to save it out, click render.